for my first line. Okay. Okay, I don't have much of a voice today. I've had a cold since last Sunday. And so we're gonna see what happens today. And I'm as good as medication and so on can get me. But I'm also supposed to preach, and we're gonna see what all that does. And that's why we're enhanced with the mic, so I don't have to project all that much at all. First of all, great to see Craig.
Yeah.
The Charles's series on afterlife is over, to all of our regrets, I think, and his marvelous PowerPoint. We're back to version 1.0, which is my class notes. And I was thinking, I already missed Charles's PowerPoint.
Just think of this retro.
It's what?
You're retro, so that's good. That's popular now.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So we're back in a series on the coming great global spiritual awakening. And we did a few of them last fall, and we did some the spring before that. Yeah, the spring before we did a few of them. And some of you recognize the concepts, which I thought, well, that's good. It was a sermon series that I did 10 years ago, back in 2014, 2015. And at that point in time, it was called New World in the Morning. And it really came to me in my mid-60s, looking at where's the church worldwide now, and where is it going to be in future decades? Where is it going to be over the next century? And so I preached a series reflecting on what I was seeing and what I expected to happen. And I say all that to say it was a very important series to me, in some ways a capstone series, but we never got to discuss it. It never turned into class discussions. But apparently it was so riveting that everyone remembers line by line what I said in the sermons. So no, I mean, you know me, over a period of time, it was what I'd like to do was give a sermon series, and then a year or two later turn it into classes. And that's the give and take. I mean, I've always been concerned that that pulpits can be, the power of the pulpit can be asymmetrical. You know, I think I've used that term before, but what that means is, in the pulpit, a person is up speaking, everyone else is listening, and unless they go like way off somewhere in some completely egregious misuse of the pulpit, they're going to get away with it, you know. I'm always very aware of how the pulpit can be misused and sometimes even abused, and I've tried not to do that. But what became important to me was to turn it into class discussion, so other viewpoints could be shared, questions could be raised, we could elaborate on it, we could expand on it, we could find the application and the implications of it. And so that's what we'll be doing for a while now. And a while now says we're in a transitional period. We've been in that since September, but we're in an intensified transitional period now, because very quickly a candidate or two are going to be coming here and for tryout weekends. We hope that happens in May. And within 2 or 3 months after that, if all works out, a new minister comes in or not. What my point is, this series can go a month, it can go 3 months, it can go 4 months, it can go 2 years. Okay, it won't go 2 years because we will be dragging Charles back in about 6 months, whatever happens. So, and we have other good teachers here too. This morning, we're going to begin with a series with a class, a unit of thought called a branding issue. We'll be talking about the issue of branding. And, but I want you to see these as, in some ways, these units stand on their own. This is going to take 3 weeks, maybe, this unit. Units coming up are salvation. What is even the biblical notion of salvation? The next unit would be scripture as it was written. And some of these are concepts that I think many of you are familiar with. But it's a matter of not just understanding scripture the way you think it reads from some flat-footed reading of the scripture, but as it was written. What was going on in that moment and with that writer? And now knowing that, now you can make applications that work for our time. But if you're just reading in flat-footed ways, as if Paul or Moses or whoever were writing it 3,000, 2,000 years ago, as if it were for us today for the first time, people just keep making misapplication after misapplication. So scripture as it was written. There'll be a unit on making sense. It's a lot of Christian concepts and doctrines that people struggle to make sense of, and we'll talk about that concept. Authenticity. The church of the future, the spirituality of the future has to have an authenticity to it. Inclusion will be a unit. Spirituality would be a unit. Encountering the presence of God would be a unit. What I want you to see is that there are units coming ahead, and this may work as a running series for a period of time, or we may just get through 2 or 3 units. Each of these units would be a class on their own, you see. And so think of it both ways. It's flexibility built into this. We can keep going for a substantial period of time. Or we can do 3 weeks on here and in salvation 5 weeks, probably, and so on. So that sets kind of the terms of where we're going here. And so I want you to to think about the concept of branding. And I don't mean branding in the sense of the Yellowstone TV series, not that branding, right? How many of you watched Yellowstone? No. Okay. Westerns, any Westerns, you know, what branding is there? That's not the branding. Okay. What branding means in business. In business. And that was actually a kind of new concept to me, but for 20 years ago, my daughter-in-law was quite accomplished in branding for businesses. She would be hired to create a branding strategy. What are we talking about? What would that be? And what might it mean for a business to have a branding issue? Why were they hiring Karen in the first place? We need someone to brand our business and to brand our products, right? Maybe it makes more sense when you think of it on the product level than the business level. But what does branding in business mean? Yeah.
Well, as somebody who's never been in business, I have heard this a lot, especially on TV. And to me, it seems to speak mostly to image,
To what?
image. of
Yeah,
the company,
image.
Or even a person's image. What do people think of when they hear that name? And what, or the product, what do people think of? Is it a good product? Is it not so good? Is it, I don't know, high tech, low tech, trusted, untrustworthy?
Yeah,
That's kind of what it means.
no, that's very well put. Annie?
I think it also means that you're trying to match your, the company is trying to match the concept of what they're providing with what people want. So it needs, it has to be delivered in such a way that it's inviting. And it's gonna be eye-catching to people that they would want to engage. So there's it's what you're doing, it's what it is, but it has to be presented in a special way so that it gains traction.
Aaron?
Well, there's so many examples, but one where I could talk about a branding issue that was not even the company's fault. Is in the 70s, there was a diet pill called AIDS, AIDS.
Oh, great.
AIDS, but it was pronounced AIDS.
Yeah,
And suddenly acquired immune deficiency syndrome came along and they went out of business.
yeah,
Not any fault of their own. But it's the ability to recognize that everybody in here says, if I go, where's the Xerox machine? Now Xerox is not a product, Xerox is a brand, but everybody knows what I'm looking for if I ask where the Xerox machine is.
yeah,
It's recognition. You know, if you say
Yeah.
something, recognition, or you, good or bad.
Yeah.
You can also, I mean, after the incident in Valdez, Alaska, anybody said Exxon,
branding issue.
branding issue, yeah.
Eva, welcome back.
Thank you, good to be back. In my view, branding is a real purpose of selling something to others. Clear and simple, services, products, whatever. To sell the image, and as Anna mentioned, and Annie, to just sell the whatever they have it to sell, that's the branding.
Okay.
It's the marketing, basically, tool.
Smart, yeah, yeah. Craig,
Also a way in which a company differentiates itself in the marketplace. It is a big deal where I work.
Yeah.
And let's face it, the airline seat is a commodity. So my company wants to charge a little more for that commodity. So what do we have that's different? And they focus on the employees, the people. We're expected to be, well, nicer,
yeah,
more engaging. And my company website is full of stuff about this.
Yeah.
And the expectations for each employee have gone up quite a bit too. So it's a huge deal, and social media plays a huge part in this.
yeah. Thank you. Okay, we basically know what branding is. That's what we just discovered from all the issues here, all the comments here. So it's the process of creating a distinct identity, which I think Anna was out of the gates with that one. Creating a distinct identity, it goes to the name you use, your logo, your mission, your values, and your tone. I thought that was interesting when I looked up the definition to see whether it was widely understood, and they threw in and tone. What is it? What is the tone of what it'll come, you know. What is the tone of the business? What tone are you setting? How are you being heard? Okay, so with this theme, we return to this series on the coming great global spiritual awakening. And this is a series that goes on. If you remember some of the things I've said previously when I'm dealing with this theme, Because I imagine glorious possibilities. You know, I see bumpy rides immediately in front of me and great things ahead. That's how I view the world. And I would view the world that way just from looking at what I see, but I also view that world because I'm a Christian and hope is what I choose to do.
Mm.
Hope is a choice. You don't have to. A lot of people aren't, but that's their choice too. It is a choice. It's not just what happens to you. It's whether you choose to hope or not. Now the critical issue here is what matters is hope is physiological.
Yep.
You know, it's physiological. It's not just, oh, I'm in a better mood today. I mean, it affects your body.
Mhm.
Your lack of hope affects your body. Your lack of hope affects other people's bodies. I mean, hope is physiological, both individually and collectively. So I expect glorious possibilities because I believe in God. But having said that, this series began with the fact of declining church attendance all across America, in part because Christianity has a branding problem. Diana Butler Bass, in her book, Christianity After Religion, notes that for a great many people, traditional religious labels now carry negative images. And even the word Christian is identified by many with its most narrow, restrictive, moralizing adherence. And so more and more other deeply committed Christians, people committed to Christianity, will call themselves other things, because the word Christian itself has a branding problem now. And so you will read Christ followers, you will read disciples of Christ, which weren't actually made up. They're the original names, but they're pulled out of storage somewhere now because Christian itself, which carried the way for centuries and centuries, now has a branding issue. But we'd come up with these other ways of calling ourselves, all in effect to say, but our church isn't like that. And there's, all over the world, probably, and certainly in the Western world, that's what churchgoers are often saying to people wondering about where they go. Oh, but our church isn't like that. You've got to come and see what our church is like. Because the brand has slipped, and churches carrying the name Christian often are stuck with a brand that they don't actually wish to have, or are just stuck with who knows what the brand is, because we've lost the whole rhythm of things now. So in your experience, how do many people feel about churches today? I don't mean to catastrophize here. Millions of people in America, and America still distinguish itself, as opposed to Europe, let's say, with fairly strong affiliation to churches, probably not as strong as in Latin America and Africa now. But what are many people feeling about churches these days? And I'll get to say and I'm thinking particularly, what do we read about churches? What is the media telling us about churches? Aaron.
What I found in my encounters with people is most people who claim to be atheists believe in God, but they don't believe in his church.
Yeah.
And it's not just Christian. I mean, in the last 20 years, anytime you bring up the word Muslim or Islam, it's immediate. Everybody immediately thinks terrorist. And that's not all of them. It's that huge blanket thing. Unfortunately, we've had more time our ancestors had more time to tarnish our brand. I mean, if you say Catholic Church, almost always negative things come. And because that's what we hear, that's all you hear, again. If it leads, that kind of media sensation.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear about the cat rescued from the tree. They want to hear about the fire that destroyed the house that the cat was living in.
Rosemary, right?
I have a friend who posted on Facebook yesterday, free membership at my church on Friday and Saturday. I don't even know. That was the advertisement. If you come Friday or Saturday, you can place membership for free. I know.
John?
Wow.
I encounter lots and lots of people in my life. And what I find is I'm amazed at how good they are. They come from all walks and all different spiritual journeys and things like that. I almost never hear them affiliate themselves with, I am Jewish, I am Christian, I am Hindu, I'm whatever. But I see good people, and I know there's a spiritual link that we all share. And yeah, there's definitely a branding problem, but I have hope because I know we're going with good people.
Exactly. Exactly. And me for the same reasons. I see hands up all over. So you're gonna have to keep reminding me of, I don't even know what order. I saw Sheldon's first.
Well, I work with teenagers, so I often talk to them about the church and spirituality. A lot of them have this impression that the church is not necessary. That they are spiritual, they can pray wherever they are. So I think a lot of in my opinion, a lot of young people, they don't really feel like the church is necessary in their lives. They feel like they can do it on their own, and there's a mistrust of a lot of institutions in general, I think. Whether it be government or the church or any other, formal institution. So I think that's a general pattern in our society right now.
Okay. Chris, and I'm counting on you to speak up because my hearing is not great. Never is great. It's not better this week. Chris.
So I have two comments. The first one is that especially living here in the Northeast.
Is what?
Especially living here in the Northeast, I've always had a hard time making friends if I've led with, yeah, I'm Chris and I'm a Christian. They often run from me almost immediately. And something, we've got more, a lot of people, they have this view of the church that they're not accepting to the LGBTQIA community, they're not accepting to, different races, they're not accepting to interfaith communities. At least that's where my generation is right now. Another thing is, and this struck me as really strange. A few months back, I was talking to one of my friends who does identify as a Christian. And he said, I kid you not, he turned to me and he said, I wish I was a preacher because my priest makes $150,000 a year. And he's like, he has a Tesla, and so not only do we have this problem of like, we aren't accepting of other communities, the church isn't accepting of other communities, but also now there's this view of the church that it's no longer a community service. It's no longer something that the community could just go to and get spiritual fulfillment. Now it's a business. Now it's no longer a nonprofit, it's a for-profit.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what my generation, that's how they view the church.
Thank you. And I heard you very clearly. Thank you. Laconia?
I lost it, but that's okay, keep going.
Yes, okay. The Eva.
Many of my friends, what I hear talking about when I identify myself always as Christian, the response would be, I am spiritual, I believe in God, but I don't believe in organized religion. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the response is, well, is a man-made, power-driven and all this So I want to say, come to my church.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I remember, it was a little bit in, response to Aaron. I was thinking about when people think of Islam as terroristic,
Yeah,
that's primarily from Christian nationalist politicians. It's not coming from people who believe in Jesus.
Annie,
I want to expand a little bit on what Sheldon said, because although, and Chris, although those are of the generation that's coming after us, I think it's also part of my generation and generations above me, generations in between. I think perhaps as a whole entity, religions, Christianity, you can break it down any way you want. We need to make a better case of why we are needed. His point is, you can do whatever you want, but why do I need it? We're not like that, not defending what we aren't. It has to be, why do we need it? Why do we come?
what do we have?
What do we have? What do we have that you're gonna want? And forget about all the other stuff. Why do we need it? Are we getting that message out clearly enough?
Yeah.
Apparently, the other message is getting out pretty clear, so we need to make a counter message of, this is why you need it. You're perfectly fine thinking that way, because that's what's been out there. But that's what has to happen now. We need to make a clear point about why we
Good
need it.
point.
And if we can't, what does that
Yeah,
say?
what does that
What
mean?
does that say,
Yep,
right?
yep. And that hence this unit of thought.
Right, and I think it's saying every point is valid. You gotta start off, every point is valid. How can we make that something that people wouldn't even think of?
Yeah.
They have to think that I am actively neglecting something that could be helpful to my life
Right.
and the life of other people.
Right.
will be.
Guy?
Yeah, what I think is one of the problems, because traditionally, we Christians, not so much Christian, religion in general, has been most of their time telling their congregants, others that are not like us are not people. Now, as the world is getting closer and closer into a smaller community where everybody knows everybody, that especially the young generation, they're discovering, my Muslim teacher is just like my pastors. So they are losing faith in the tradition, and I'm finding that also. I have a couple of young Muslim who just joined my office, and we were finding that even with his father, we're finding that we have a lot more in common than we have with people I would call Christian, my Christian brothers, and the same for them as people they would call the Muslim brothers. In terms of ethics, we are closer to each other than a lot of people who are within our groups. So that break down the wall that other people are not people. We are finding that all people are people, and that's why a lot of church, probably a lot of church are facing today.
Yeah. Scott?
I think that the biggest issue is that most people perceive churches as just another competing ideology. So there are a whole bunch of competing ideologies, and the pressure to join your group is the pressure to adopt this series of ideologies. And I don't know if I want to do that, number one. Number two, you're not very good at being consistent with your own ideology. So not only are you asking me to adopt these things, but you're asking me to be as disingenuous about it as you are, which is a huge problem. I think the biggest problem today is that we don't give people credit for their own spiritual journey. And, for instance, whenever someone says to me, I could never believe in a God that, whatever, my response is, well, perhaps you shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it followed up fairly quickly and I don't believe in that God either.
Right, exactly.
More often than not, if you can draw out what God it is they believe in, you can say, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. No one should believe in that God. Unfortunately, a few people do, but they shouldn't. Charles.
Yeah, as a seminary professor, I see many of these same things, but also, you know, where people are at who are studying to become leaders of churches, right, of all kinds, right? And one of the big shifts in conversation that's happening is that out there, churches are more and more perceived as places of harm, not help. And the harm comes from exclusionary practices, shaming, not being able to be yourself, forcing people to believe certain things, exclusion of people in, well, you know, women, gay people, I mean, on and on, right? Racial issues. And so part of what this goes back a little bit to what Annie was saying about what are we offering? You know, and the other shift that goes along with this in language is, instead of talking about churches, people start talking about communities. You know, what kind of community are you a part of? And, you know, that's partly to get away from the notion of church that is a box you have to fit in, and if you don't, then you get hurt somehow. Right?
Yeah.
So, and of course, social media, you know, makes this, and politics all make it much more complicated. But it's sifting through all that, you know, that's really challenging.
It is, and it's the times we live in. Julie and then Al.
Yeah, I just want to say, one thing that I think is also hard is that church, you know, a lot of it's about coming to a place and being with people. And I think the idea of coming to a place, you know, was really messed up with the pandemic, although it was already kind of out of fashion. But even now, and we even see that, you know, amongst ourselves, how hard it is to get someone to come to a place to be with their community. So I think that's a big part of it too, that we don't think about as much, but you know, it's a lot of work to get someone to come to a place.
Yeah.
They experience community different ways now.
Yeah.
And most of it's not coming to a place.
Yeah, well, I mean, behind all this, there are so many demographic, sociological issues. I mean, we come to places 30, 40, sometimes 50 miles from where we live because of branding. Like what is a denomination but a brand? What is denominationalism but branding? And I mean, what people experienced 100 years ago was the church was over there, that block, right over there. You can see the steeple from my house. Well, okay, I'll be there at 10 o'clock, you know. So it's, and I'm not saying that's the way it has to be. I'm just saying that is the way it is. And it's far distant places that maybe are but place is an issue too, that it's primarily people. Al.
When I think of this issue, the thing that comes to mind most readily is unintended branding. The world knew what the Catholic Church did during the Crusades, but the information moved very slowly across the world. But when those planes hit the World Trade Center, and when young boys were abused by Catholic priests, and I forget the name of the famous megachurch pastor years ago, I think it was in the 70s that
Fill in the blank.
I don't even, yeah.
My point is that maybe there were certain people that wanted to be branded a certain way with those planes going into the World Trade Center, but for most of us, they became evil overnight.
Yeah. They. Just an amorphous they.
All of it.
Yeah.
And for the Catholic Church, it's a hell of a big reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any faith.
Yeah.
In that dogma.
Yeah.
So. It's unintended branding, I think.
Yeah.
And with the information age, it's just like.
Yeah.
It's instant, it's right in
Well,
there.
hold on to what Al said. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're gonna keep coming back to that. I need that prayer sheet to be moving across here to Aaron. I'm sorry, I should have said that from the beginning. Anyone in the front row need it badly before it gets to Aaron? Okay. So we've got about 3 minutes to read it over, Aaron, and sorry about that. So there's a second part to that question. It's great that we got through one question this morning.
What were you saying about 2 years?
It is,
Don't put a date on it.
here's part two. Here's part two of the question, which is it fair to identify the word Christian largely with those who are most narrow, restrictive, and moralizing? And I'm just think about that a second. We don't need to discuss it at length. It's not actually fair to do that. It's just the way it is. That's how branding works. You almost get back to what Al is talking about, is branding's going to take you anywhere. And Jesus is going to be saying something about that, and that we're going to get to early next week, which is judge not that you be not judged. I mean, we're going to spend a lot of time with that text starting next week. And that is, you could say in a nutshell, that is an anti-branding statement. Quit branding. You know, I mean, helpful to have a few labels that help you find your way around the world. But I mean, Muslim is a classic case. It keeps coming up this morning, which is some of the most pious, devout people in the world are Muslims. You know, there's a billion of them, more, and many of them are devout and pious and God-fearing people, and all we think about is the radical edge. And that's a classic branding problem. Let me look at the clock. Let's see. I'm just going to show you where we're going. If this is an issue across all age groups, it's especially an issue for young people today who often see the church as mainly judgmental, which way too often it is. Many 20-somethings find this troubling. They're put off by it. And so the church has a branding issue, but much of the problem has to do with how much branding the church has done. You know, the church is the unfair recipient of branding. The church is a major originator. Historic church, the church in real life, is a major originator of branding. We're going to start there next week with in what ways do we brand. I'll remind you of one comment I made in passing here. Denominationalism is branding. Mm-hmm. And that was classic branding, and there's like thousands of brands. You know, that's one way of branding, but there are ways that are far more destructive and of the human soul than that. Well, I don't know. Undermining the unity of the God's people on earth is a pretty not good thing to have happened, but it did happen. We're kind of stuck with it for now. Okay, thank you for your wide participation, and Aaron will lead us in